Speaking of another fun one, and this was actually a shocker, and most people may have not even watched it because it took place earlier in the day on Sunday. I love when ESPN, ABC, they start to bring back these Sunday afternoon showcase games. That was always so much fun. I loved getting up and just watching basketball right out of the gates. And the Pelicans and the Boston Celtics, these are two teams that, to be honest, were matching up at a time when they were both really disappointing. They've really had disappointing seasons up to this point. Pelicans are 13 and 17, below where we thought they would be. The Celtics are barely a 500 team, 15 and 15 is their record 30 games into the season. They're the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, but have just really looked out of sorts and inconsistent. And they lose to the Pelicans after blowing a 24-point lead with 6:30 remaining in the third quarter. This was a historically blown lead. The largest blown lead for the Celtics in franchise history, the largest comeback win for the Pelicans in their history. So, big historical context here. And down the stretch, you saw the stars for both teams shine the brightest. Jason Tatum hit a tough step back fall away over Josh Hart, just stopped on a dime, created that space, rose up at the free throw line, hit the jumper. Then Zion Williamson got the ball and just played bully ball to the rim, layup and the foul against Tristan Thompson. Mind you, he moved a guy in Tristan Thompson who's 6'9", 250 pounds. Zion just made him look like a little kid. This was a man amongst boys, and he's still just in his second a year in the league. And so gives the Pelicans a 2-point lead, and then Jason Tatum, again, star is born, with 0.2 seconds left, hits a running floater and just kind of softly swishes that one in, and we go to overtime. And then in overtime, I love that Stan Van Gundy put the ball in Zion Williamson's hands. He drove to the basket, collapsed the defense, kicked it out. Brandon Ingram hit a 3 to cap off a 33-point night. A really positive sign moving forward for a Pelicans team that needed some type of turnaround. But if you're the Celtics, all this was basically a microcosm of what their season has been, which has been marred by inconsistencies and a lack of depth. And we saw that come to fruition once again because the Celtics just can't get a consistent third scorer. You've got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who are playing huge minutes that will most certainly have an effect moving forward at the end of the season. Brad Stevens is riding those two guys as long as he can. They combined for 57 points. No one else, the entire rest of the team, scored 58 points on really inefficient shooting. And Kemba Walker, I've talked about this before. I love Kemba Walker, cardiac Kemba at UConn. I loved him in Charlotte. But the problem is you go 5 for 21, you go 1 for 12 from the three-point line. That's not going to get it done. And they need Kemba Walker to be that missing piece, to fill that void, not only for himself, but of Gordon Hayward, which I'll touch on, because they're just not getting production anywhere outside of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. They just don't. They don't have it. They don't have depth. And I understand that Marcus Smart is out, and it was reported that he'll continue to stay out until after the All-Star break because of that calf strain. I understand it. But as good as Marcus Smart is, they just need some more consistency out of this team. And I don't know if it's because of Brad Stevens and the fact that his messages maybe aren't getting through to his players anymore. That's why we sometimes see regime shifts and changes at the head coaching position. Now, I'm not claiming that Brad Stevens deserves to be fired. I don't see that at all. He's a great coach, but his message, for whatever reason, is not getting through to these guys right now. And think about this. The Celtics gave away Gordon Hayward. Now, I understand he wasn't necessarily playing up to the level of his contract in Boston. And right now you're seeing the effects that he's having in Charlotte. Charlotte's a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference, just one spot behind Boston, barely. But you don't get anything in return for him. You just let Gordon Hayward walk. And to replace his production, you bring in a backup point guard in Jeff Teague, who's been banished from the lineup, doesn't play anymore. Peyton Pritchard is a backup point guard, so you already have a backup point guard. And then you bring in a backup center in Tristan Thompson, who I like him for rebounding purposes. But right now, Robert Williams and Daniel Tice are your two guys. You don't need Tristan Thompson in there. What you need is depth at the wing position, which they don't have. That's who you replace Gordon Hayward with. So you just let this guy walk, and you've got no contingency plan. You've got no backup plan in place, and now we're seeing the effects of it. Because when Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum go to the bench, even though they're already playing 36 to 37 minutes a game, you can't score a thing. You can't create any offense, and that's what Kemba Walker was supposed to be there for. And blowing big leads has been the Achilles heel of the Celtics team. That was the storyline last year. In the playoffs, we saw how the Celtics led by 14 points against the Miami Heat entering the fourth quarter, game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost that game. They led by 15 with 10 minutes left in the third quarter in game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and they lost that game to the Miami Heat. So we're accustomed to seeing them blow these leads, which unfortunately, again, has been the storyline surrounding this team, has been their Achilles heel. And, you know, if you're the Celtics, in the words of the great coach Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are. And they're a 500 team right now. And there's no way around it. Unfortunately, they need to step it up. They need to step it up. They got to find some depth somewhere. And they're another one of these teams where they're going to be helped by the All-Star break. Josiah Destin. Love the headset. Cardiac Kemba, baby. Appreciate Josiah Destin, a good friend of the show. If you haven't checked out any of his production work, this guy is really something special. Anytime you need music video, any production, Josiah Destin is your guy. Appreciate you tuning in, buddy. So they need to change something. They need to change something up, but a historic game for both franchises, let alone one. Normally when you hear about historic losses or historic wins, it's normally just in the direction of one team, but this was historic on both fronts.